Maybe first, let's take a step back and look at the BizML framework in a bit more depth. You outlined the BizML framework in quite a few steps throughout the book. So maybe walk us through that framework in a bit more detail and what those different steps look like.
Yeah, sure. So BizML, we break it into 6 steps, and the first 3 correspond to those 3 fundamentals: what's predicted, how well, what's done about it, but not in those order. So they're pre-production, you're establishing those. And the other 3 are the same thing you do with any ML project. Everybody who's involved with ML knows this: prep the data, train the model, and deploy. Obviously, you need to monitor moving forward, but we're framing it just trying to get to deployment. We talk about that later in the book, but BizML, as I'm formalizing, is those 6 steps. You could formalize the project as 5 steps or as 7 steps. People, at least senior data scientists, are familiar with the idea that you need to conceive of it into that kind of organizational process, but there's no standard that's generally known, especially to business side practitioners. In fact, your stakeholders, your client, the business side, generally don't even know that machine learning projects really require a specialized kind of business paradigm. So what I'm trying to do here is send 2 messages: ramp them up on those 3 semi-technical concepts: what's predicted, how well, and what's done about it, and the need for a paradigm. Let's give it a nice buzzword, as you said, BizML, right? So that's actually the domain for my web for my book, bizml.com. So I put in several hours, people, picking out just the right 5 letters for what I think could be an awesome buzzword just to help evangelize this whole point. But let's all get on the same page for the need for a standard business side paradigm or playbook. Let's agree to how to break it down to 6 steps or something like that. And the need for that collaboration and the ramp up on the business side. So that's my message. And I think that that's the antidote. I think that's where we're going to get a lot more traction, not just in how excited and hyped up everyone is about machine learning, but in actually getting value-driven, deployment-oriented projects, and it greatly improve that track record.
Okay. And, you talk about this collaboration element here. I want to zero in on that. When I look at data teams in general, when I speak to data leaders, I'm much more involved with the data leadership aspect. And what I get a sense from when they speak about data science and machine learning projects is that there seems to be an expectation that, both parties have between business stakeholders and data scientists and data teams. They expect the other teams to own the main drivers of the ROI of a machine learning project, right? Data scientists see themselves as the architects of a technical solution to a business problem that the business stakeholders should own. And business owners see themselves as handing off, to a certain extent, that the problem to the data scientist and the machine learning engineer. So maybe how does ownership and collaboration evolve under the BizML paradigm? How should data teams and business stakeholders evolve their collaboration and their approach accordingly?
That's a great question, and it's the pertinent question. I'm agnostic about it, and I've framed BizML in a way that it can go either way, or some combination, or a new role, or a new responsibility of the chief data officer, or whatever it is. The point is that somebody's got to take it on. And if the organization agrees that, hey, we need to follow a specialized business paradigm so that we actually plan and collaborate accordingly so we can get this thing deployed, not just the number crunching, not just a model that looks pretty hanging on the wall, then in order to execute on this business paradigm, obviously somebody's going to need to lead it, take responsibility. You're very much right, the way you put it, that both sides tend to point to the other as a responsibility. And in that way, the hose and the faucet are failing to connect, right? Data scientists think, well, that's all kind of managerial stuff, and my job's just to make a model. Its value is self-evident. It's not my responsibility to get it deployed. Of course, the organization will deploy it unless they're nuts. Whereas at the same time, business professionals say, oh, I don't need to get into those details. I delegate all that to data scientists. So, I don't need to look under the hood of the car in order to learn to drive it. But as I mentioned, no, they do. The organization, business leaders need to learn semi-technical, not the core rocket science, but how well the rocket science works, how it's predicted predictive outputs, the probabilities output by model, will specifically integrate, will actually drive individual organizational decisions. That level of detail. And once you start talking to a business stakeholder, well, this is what I mean by semi-technical. You don't need to be changing spark plugs, but you do need to be getting a sense concretely of how this is going to deliver value and how much value it's going to deliver. It's not that crazy. And they're like, oh, okay, I don't have to be a rocket scientist. I don't have to actually crunch the data myself, but there is something kind of semi-technical. And from the data scientist's perspective, what I'm referring to is semi-technical. Again, what's predicted, how well, and what's done about it, isn't technical at all. And from the business person's perspective, it's often extremely technical. So there's this long continuum between the two sides that we need to get to connect. So let's agree to sort of midpoint that everyone speaks that same language. It's a sort of a stretch for both sides, but otherwise we're just going to continue the same track record.